here we go, Star Wars fans. It's happened again. It's happened in the past, and it's probably going to happen in the future. For those of you who aren't in the loop with everything going on at Lucasfilm, Disney, Star Wars World, well, there's been tons of drama surrounding the Rogue Squadron project, the Patty Jenkins directed film that was supposed to come out in 2023. Last week we talked about how it was delayed a full year due to complete script rewrites. And now today we're finding out that it is allegedly indefinitely put on hold due to creative differences. So I said that we've seen this before. We've seen this happen numerous amounts of times under the current leadership at Lucasfilm. We've seen it with Josh Trank in the Boba Fett project. We've seen it with the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, and now it's being transitioned into a show under new creators. We've seen this with Solo, with the Phil Lord and Miller situation. We've also seen this with Duel of the Fates, Colin Trevorrow's Episode 9. We also saw this with Rogue One, how they replaced Gareth Edwards towards the end of the production with Tony Gilroy to complete the film. But the bottom line is all of this is happening again, repeating the same pattern that we've seen happen at Lucasfilm with the executives and the creators, and how they can never get on the same page. We're going to discuss all this today on the show. Normally, I would save it for a podcast episode every Sunday at 12, live on YouTube and Twitch, if you want to check it out. But I wanted to make it stand alone because this is a big deal, and it affects not only Rogue Squadrons, but it affects the company as a whole and the future of Star Wars going forward. I'll tell you a little bit about my impressions of the company so far and why I think we need a drastic change in leadership at Lucasfilm, but also how this has been a problem not just for the Disney era, but also years before that as well under George Lucas. But before I get into that, let's just talk about Rogue Squadron real quick and get you up to date. So the news that this was allegedly put on an indefinite hold came to us from Cinema Blend. And basically what they're saying is, as far as film franchises go, there are quite few as massively popular as Star Wars. The galaxy far, far away has passed down across generations, but it's currently in a unique place. While the universe continues to expand, thanks to shows on Disney+, it's taking a break from theaters. And now we know why Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron movie was allegedly put on an indefinite hold. But most importantly, I want to notate that the scooper of this report comes to us from Matthew Belloni, who used to be an editor for The Hollywood Reporter, so that gives some credence to their name, and what makes me think it's a reliable source. Now, the author of this article goes on to say that the latest update for Rogue Squadron comes to us from Puck, with a journalist, Matthew Belloni, citing unnamed contacts close to the production. And according to the report, Patty Jenkins simply hasn't been able to agree on a script for the upcoming blockbuster with Lucasfilm executives. While fans were hoping the project still comes to fruition, it's unclear if and when that'll actually happen, given this setback. So for those of you who watch this show, Han Talks First, regularly, you know that last week on the podcast, we talked about Rogue Squadron was delayed a year due to excessive and massive rewrites to the script. And I remember saying this and getting a lot of heat back saying that that's not true, you're just speculating falsely. I even went on another person's stream and talked about it and got some massive hate from people. And I wasn't saying it in a negative way because I'm actually looking forward to Rogue Squadron. But this turns out to be true. And now we know it's not because they were changing the story for Patty Jenkins' sake, but because they couldn't get on the same terms as the executives at Lucasfilm. Now, we'll talk about Kathleen Kennedy in a second because I have some thoughts on this, and it kind of goes into the pattern we've seen between her and creatives in the past working on Star Wars projects. But as far as the announcement specifically for Rogue Squadrons, it's just very bizarre to me that they would come out 1 year ago. 1 year ago, if you remember at the Investors Day for Disney, they came out and they announced that they were doing tons of Star Wars projects. They were doing TV shows. They had movies planned. Taika Waititi's doing a movie. Patty Jenkins is doing a movie. But what was stand out between all the announcements was with Patty Jenkins, they actually had a video, a teaser trailer for the announcement, showing her getting into an X-Wing suit, putting on an X-Wing helmet, and then walking towards an X-Wing. It was very well done, and it made myself and a lot of other fans really hyped for this movie because that was the way you do an announcement. But what bothers me, in hindsight, it looks like they jumped the gun. They made an announcement that they were working together without ever having talked about what movie they were going to make. And that, I think, is the biggest mistake they have made with this movie, Rogue Squadrons. We do know that Patty Jenkins obviously had a very clear vision for what she wanted to do. She wanted to make a space dogfight with X-Wing fighters and base it off her own experience that her dad had being a fighter pilot in our world. She talked about already having been working with the writer, already having done a first draft, and excited to do the project. So it seemed like she was already clear and set on her vision and knew the story she wanted to tell. Where the problem comes in is it sounds like Kathleen Kennedy didn't actually understand what the vision was, or even consider to ask her what that vision would be until it seems like they got into early pre-production stages. If you remember a couple months ago, we talked on the channel how they just assigned a new production designer, they just brought on a cinematographer, and they pretty much had a whole crew hired for pre-production, and they were getting ready to start casting. That's another thing I can point out, and they have not casted this movie at all. There is no casting agent, and they have not started auditions. But that's just a side note. But what really is weird to me is how they got this far into the development and pre-production stages of this movie with a release date, mind you, of 2023, and now they're having creative differences. Where was Kathleen Kennedy during the development of the script? I realize she has to run a company, but if you are also the sole producer on this project, you need to be creatively involved at all times, and you need to understand what is going on with your team. It just sounds to me like a communication issue. I mean, just to kind of jump to a separate topic, and Kathleen Kennedy's leadership at Lucasfilm, I don't think she's doing a good job. I really don't. I mean, she is a fantastic producer, but she is now also a studio executive. She's running a studio. Lucasfilm is a film studio. And if we look at the stuff they've put out recently, the thing that their attention is most focused on is the High Republic books. Books. This film studio, Lucasfilm, is doing more for their book readers than for their films. A filmmaking studio. Now, you could also argue that, well, Kathleen Kennedy is also bringing us television shows, and she's probably, focusing her more attention on that. Well, the fact is, Kathleen Kennedy is not involved with the creative at the television division. Clearly, that is represented by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. They're bringing us The Mandalorian, they're bringing us Ahsoka, The Book of Boba Fett, etc. Kathleen Kennedy is a film producer. She wants to produce films, but I think the studio head position is now getting in the way of that. I don't think she understands how to run this studio while at the same time producing the projects underneath it. And a great example of this is the recent Disney Plus Day that happened last Friday. If you guys remember, a lot of fans were disappointed that there was no Star Wars announcements. There was hardly any presence of Lucasfilm as a company, period. And to have a presence at something like Disney Plus Day, to have announcements ready to go, does fall on the studio head, which in this case would be Kathleen Kennedy. Now, to be fair to Miss Kennedy, I do think that Disney Plus Day was a last-minute thing that they were going to do for their streaming service. And I say that because it looked like no studios, National Geographic, Marvel, they really didn't have much preparation for this. Number one, they didn't even have a proper presentation. Number two, everything was done via Twitter, just a massive Twitter thread. And it really just seemed like a way for them to promote their streaming service because their early quarter results were not performing well to their standards. So I just have to question the leadership at Lucasfilm right now because number one, I really don't know who is in charge over there. Who is in charge? Who is making the decisions behind this stuff? Because you also have to consider this is still a Disney company. It's not just a standalone Lucasfilm independent organization. They are still run by Disney. So what is Disney's stance on Lucasfilm's strategy? There is no strategy. I'm having a hard time understanding what the strategic moves are for this company. Something you have to look for in a leader, in a studio head, is number one, innovation, two, responsibility, and number three, strategy. You have to have a plan. It can be a 5-year plan, it can be a 2-year plan. It doesn't have to be 10 years, but you have to have a plan. You have to know where you are going. And I really don't think they have a plan right now. Again, to kind of defend Kathleen Kennedy, I think she is a good producer, but I don't think she's handling or juggling the role of producer and studio head at the same time, because often those two roles are conflicting. Her studio head hat goes on, and it might disagree with some of the choices she's making as a producer on a film. And that could be one of the cases with this Rogue Squadron situation. Maybe the story Patty Jenkins wanted to tell was a really great story, but it's not marketable. And maybe it's not an easy sell to their parent company, Disney, and how they're going to push it, whether it's to theaters or streaming, etc. Who knows? And I mentioned earlier in this video that, I think Lucasfilm has had leadership issues far before Kathleen Kennedy, far before Disney bought them. Yes, even under George Lucas. I think George Lucas is a great businessman, but I also don't think he was a great studio head as well. For those of you that remember, way back in 2004, 2005, 2006, etc., George Lucas kept telling people about this new Star Wars television show that was going to come out. And Rick McCallum, one of the producers and also executives of Lucasfilm at the time, had been saying the same thing, but they could never get the means to do so. They could never find the right platform. They could never get it off the ground. They could never find the financing, which is strange to think because George Lucas has all the money in the world. But so there's situations like that. It took them a long time to get those prequel movies out the door. And then they wanted to follow up by making TV shows and expanding Star Wars and doing spin-offs and things like that. But they struggled trying to get them off the ground. There was no plan. There is no plan from what I can tell at Lucasfilm. Obviously, I have a lot of pent-up emotions about this because I really just want more Star Wars films. And yes, they announced over a year ago, Bob Iger himself announced that Star Wars films were going on a hiatus. That's fine. That's fine with me. Take the time to develop great products, to make great movies. Take your time with it. I'm fine if you want to delay projects. That is totally cool. But do not announce projects without first getting on the same page as your directors, your writers, your creators, and then announce the project, because we've seen this happen time and time again. I don't want the next time a Star Wars movie is announced to get excited about who is involved just to find out a couple months later that they had creative differences. It's a trend. Do you guys not see the same thing happening over and over again? Creative differences, creative differences. I forgot to also mention the guys who did the Game of Thrones. I forget what they're called. D&D. I forget their names, but anyway, those writers too, they were brought on to create a trilogy of movies, and then find out a couple months later after the fan reception for the last season of Game of Thrones, they were fired from the job because of creative differences. That's another thing I see Kathleen Kennedy do in her position as the head of Lucasfilm. She likes to grab hot talent. Patty Jenkins snatched her up before Wonder Woman 84 comes out. Wonder Woman 84 comes out. Fans did not like it as much. A lot of people actually hate the movie. I didn't think it was too bad, but a lot of people don't like the movie. And now we see a falling out. Similar to the Game of Thrones people. What happened with that? And you could also say the same argument for the Josh Trank Boba Fett situation. Snatched him up while he was really hot. The Fantastic Four came out. People hated it. It was a bad movie. And he immediately gets canned from the project. It's another pattern in the strategy we see, which I don't even consider strategy because I think there is no game plan for what they're trying to do at Lucasfilm. You can tell there's a strategy with their book division. I don't know who's running the High Republic novels section, but whoever they are, kudos. You're doing a great job. You have a plan. You release 3 books every quarter or something like that, and one's an adult book, one's a young adult, and one is like a child's book or a comic or something like that. I haven't read them yet, but it's obviously a strategy, and it's working. People who read the books do like the books, from what I hear, and at some point I'll start them, but I haven't gotten around to it. Now look, all of this that I've said is my interpretation of the events I see unfolding before my eyes. You can look it up for yourself. You can determine what you think is actually happening. I've just been so frustrated with this idea that things get announced, they get delayed and or canceled. It really just, it makes me sad because I am a Star Wars fan and I do love Disney, Lucasfilm, everything about them. But it just hurts me a lot when I see projects I'm looking forward to get canceled. And I wish that this would be resolved. So I would love to know what you guys think though. Please let me know in the comments. Be nice about it. or hit me up on social media at Han Talks First. And if you're curious to hear more from my podcast or this channel, head on over to the YouTube page or on any podcast host of choice and subscribe. And you can find out other great content there as well. We go live every Sunday right here on YouTube and Twitch at noon Pacific time with the Han Talks First podcast. You can check us out there. And until next time, my friends, somehow, some way, somewhere this week, may the Force be with you.